In October 1890, a sign painter named James Scotford was digging post holes in a field near Wyman, Michigan. He struck something in the dirt, a small clay cup. He kept digging. More objects came up, carved tablets, strange symbols. Within weeks, word was spreading through Montcalm County that an ancient civilization had left its mark in the Michigan soil. Scotford kept finding things. For the next 30 years, he never stopped. By the time the digging finally ended, more than 3,000 objects had come out of the ground across 17 Michigan counties: clay tablets, copper plates, slate boxes, stone caskets, pipes, coins, figurines, copper crowns that Scotford claimed had been found resting on the skulls of prehistoric kings. Many bore inscriptions, cuneiform, hieroglyphics, symbols nobody could fully identify, scattered across the same object in combinations that made no linguistic sense. The tablets told stories. Divided into panels like a comic strip, they illustrated the Garden of Eden, the Tower of Babel, the flood, the wicked drowning, the ark floating, the dove returning, the animals filing out 2 by 2, the rainbow appearing as a token of peace, Moses handing down the 10 Commandments, episodes from the life of Christ. And on almost every single piece, the same small symbol appeared in the same prominent position, a cuneiform-style mark that researchers would later nickname the mystic symbol, the tribal mark, or, more bluntly, the forger's signature. Scotford had a method. He rarely dug alone. He would bring along a trusted local, a sheriff, a doctor, a clergyman, a respected neighbor, and have a laborer dig in a spot Scotford himself selected. When the shovel struck something, Scotford would step back and let his guest pull the object free with their own hands. The emotional thrill of personal discovery did something to people's judgment. A man who unearthed an ancient relic with his own fingers in front of witnesses rarely wanted to believe he'd been handed a fake. Critics noticed something else. No relic was ever found unless Scotford or one of his associates was present at the dig. Not once, not in 30 years, not in 17 counties. In 1907, the operation changed shape. Daniel Soper arrived. Soper had served as Michigan's Secretary of State in 1891 for exactly 1 year, before being forced to resign over accusations of embezzlement. He fled to Arizona, where he tried planting genuine Native American artifacts and then discovering them in front of local archaeologists. The Arizona scholars weren't fooled. They exposed him almost immediately. Soper came back to Michigan with his reputation in ruins and his appetite for the scheme undiminished. He and Scotford became partners. Scotford supplied the relics. Soper supplied the sales pitch, calling the discoveries the most wonderful find ever made in this country, and offering pieces for sale through the mail under letterhead that promised immense dividends and millions in sight. Together they expanded the operation dramatically. Digs multiplied. Investors multiplied. The relics multiplied fastest of all. The most devoted believer in the whole affair was a Catholic priest, Father James Savage, pastor of Most Holy Trinity Church in Detroit, attended hundreds of digs alongside Soper. He amassed one of the largest private collections of Michigan relics in existence. His faith in their authenticity never wavered publicly. He once said that if he doubted Soper's integrity for a moment, he would have nothing further to do with him. Whether Savage was a true believer or a knowing accomplice, lending the scheme religious credibility, has never been settled. What is certain is that his collection and his name gave the relics a respectability that pure commerce alone could never have purchased. The relics' religious content reached further still. Leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints took an interest, drawn by the possibility of physical evidence connecting ancient America to a Near Eastern culture, a question with deep significance for the faith. The church accumulated a substantial collection and stored it at a museum in Salt Lake City. They never officially declared the objects authentic. They also never gave them back. Skepticism arrived almost immediately, and it never fully went away. In 1892, the relics were brought before Francis Kelsey, a classical archaeologist at the University of Michigan. He rejected them outright. He published articles denouncing the objects as frauds and pushed, unsuccessfully, for federal legislation that would criminalize archaeological forgery. The objects kept appearing anyway, for another 28 years. In 1907, the Detroit News ran a story calling the whole affair the most colossal hoax of a century, pointing out the detail that should have ended it immediately. No discovery, ever, had been made without Scotford or Soper standing nearby. The story barely slowed them down. The unraveling, when it finally came, arrived through people closest to the operation. A woman named Mary Robson lived in a boarding house next door to Scotford's sons, Percy and Charles. She told a reporter that hammering went on in their room day and night. The boys, she said, referred to themselves as Detroit's ancient relic factory. In 1911, Scotford's own stepdaughter signed a sworn affidavit. She stated that she had personally watched him manufacturing the relics. When she had voiced doubt about their authenticity, she said he had threatened her life. That same year, Frederick Starr, an anthropology professor at the University of Chicago, examined the objects and declared them fakes in the pages of the Detroit News. A separate reporter tracked down Scotford working in his shed, surrounded by half-finished relics in various stages of manufacture. According to that reporter, Scotford was not embarrassed in the slightest. He simply tried to sell him a stone casket covered in hieroglyphics for $100. When the reporter hesitated, Scotford dropped the price to $25. Neither Scotford nor Soper ever confessed, not once, not under public exposure, not under sworn testimony from Scotford's own family, not under direct professional accusation from two separate university scholars a generation apart. Both men maintained the relics were genuine for the rest of their lives. Scotford moved to Detroit sometime after 1912. No further record of him has ever been located. Both he and Soper died in the 1920s, the scheme essentially still running, the question of authenticity never publicly resolved by either man. After their deaths, no new Michigan relics were ever found again. For decades, the objects sat across collections, church storage, private homes, university shelves, their authenticity an open question that mainstream archaeology considered settled and popular interest refused to abandon. In 2001, Richard Stamps, an anthropology professor at Oakland University, was given access to examine the relics with modern forensic techniques unavailable to anyone in Scotford's lifetime. He found saw marks, file marks, tool patterns consistent with late 19th and early 20th century manufacturing equipment, not ancient craftsmanship. Some of the slate tablets, he determined, matched the precise dimensions and characteristics of milled roofing slate, the exact kind of material being produced commercially near Scotford's own residence at the time. Separate metallurgical testing on the copper objects reached the same conclusion through an entirely different method. The copper had been manufactured using 20th century industrial techniques. It could not possibly predate the era in which Scotford lived. The Latter-day Saints Church eventually donated its entire Michigan relics collection to the Michigan History Museum in Lansing. A portion went on public display in 2003. It did not stay on display for long. Within a few years, the objects were returned to storage, where most remain today, out of public view, in institutional limbo, neither fully discredited from public memory nor confidently presented as anything more than what the evidence overwhelmingly indicates them to be. Additional pieces from Soper's personal collection were purchased decades later by a Latter-day Saints historian and eventually deeded to the church as well. Smaller groups of relics ended up at the Smithsonian Institution and at an Ohio State Museum. The rest, likely the majority of the original 3,000, remained scattered across private collections, never centrally catalogued, never fully accounted for, their current locations and total number unknown to any single institution or researcher. Nobody knows exactly how many Michigan relics still exist. Nobody knows exactly where most of them are. In 1986, a writer named Henriette Mertz published a book titled The Mystic Symbol, arguing for the relic's authenticity against the prevailing academic consensus. Mertz was no fringe figure. She had been a practicing patent attorney, admitted before the United States Supreme Court, had worked on the Manhattan Project, and had served as a Navy lieutenant commander during the Second World War. Her credentials did not change the forensic evidence. The saw marks remained saw marks. The modern copper remained modern copper. But her book, and the believers who still cite it, illustrate something the saw marks alone cannot explain. Why so many people, sheriffs, doctors, priests, a future Supreme Court admitted attorney, wanted so badly for the Michigan relics to be real. Scotford built thousands of objects over 30 years. Soper sold them with the enthusiasm of a man who had nothing left to lose. Together they manufactured an ancient civilization that never existed, scattered its supposed remains across an entire state, and constructed a forgery so extensive that even now, more than a century later, nobody can say with certainty where all the pieces ended up. The clay cup Scotford pulled from a Michigan field in October 1890 was the first object in what became one of the largest archaeological frauds in American history. It was also, in its own way, completely genuine. It really was found in the dirt. He had simply put it there first.